I'm Colin Hampton. I'm the coordinator of the Derbyshire Unemployed Workers Centres, and I've been coordinator of the Derbyshire Unemployed Workers Centre since the miners' strike 25 years ago. And when I joined the Unemployed Workers Centres, there was 250 organisations throughout the country. That's what I came into. 250 centres, we had regional organisers, we had a national organisation, and really the Unemployed Workers Centres at that time was something where you couldn't really, it's a bit like the trains years ago, you couldn't be more than 12 miles from a railway station. At that time you probably couldn't be more than 30 or 40 miles from an Unemployed Workers Centre. So what's happened that we're now in a situation where we're down to about 50, and if you dug a little deeper, probably only about 35 to 40 effective centres in the country. Well, I was lucky because when I first started at the Unemployed Workers Centres, I was involved with people who were around at the time of the 1920s and the 1930s with the unemployed workers movement, and I was able to gain from their experience of organisation during that time. And one of the things that they said was that unemployed workers in the 1980s and 90s were in a better situation in some senses with the organisation that we had then than was previous, and that was because in that period they had very little support and very little connection with the organised trade union movement, and in that sense they had no power, they had no connection to economic power. Unemployed people can't withdraw their labour. What power can they exert on that society? And the issue as well was that the bad issue from that period, the 80s and the 90s, was that the government and the forces that be understood the subject of unemployment better, and with the introduction of fortnightly signing on for people who were unemployed, the feeling of isolation for unemployed workers became greater. No longer could you address groups of workers outside the labour exchange as you probably see on old films from the pre-war period. People just went in to sign on, very rarely met other people who were in a similar situation, and so there was no feeling of common cause, and it was very difficult to engender that feeling. The problem was, I think, with organisation at that time, it was that it was a buildings-based organisation. In the 80s, the Unemployed Workers Centres were set up, but at that time they were funded largely by organisations, local authorities, which were largely then labour controlled, and so they were very quick to want to fund organisations who they saw as being a buffer against the Tory government, and it was expedient because politically they could be damaging to the Tory government. So the funding, in a sense, was poured in from the local authorities, but unfortunately it went as quickly as it came, and so from 250 unemployed workers centres in the mid-80s, it fell back gradually and then quickly to the situation that we're in now. And the problem is when the building went, the organisation went as well. When the unemployed centre lost its funding, the people who were involved went on to do other things and not to organise around unemployed and community issues. And so the centre's lost its network. And I think that in the coming period we need to learn from what happened during the period that we've last seen, so that we can actually go forward as unemployment is rising again, in order to be able to organise this time much more effectively, remembering that it's people who organise and campaign and not buildings. Is that all right?
Brilliant, that was great, yes, thank you, fantastic.